Clark just hit the clicker.
He did. He's ready to go. He's got a director hat on.
He's got his director hat on, although he doesn't have his director chair going, which I'm a little bit bummed out about that. But he's looking at us like, you guys better get serious. So welcome everybody to episode 23, Aaron. 23. Yeah. So we're going to dig into this number a little bit here in a minute, but 23. So 23 is a good number, right?
It's a great number.
Yeah. Well, welcome to all of our listeners, episode number 23 of the Bar Podcast. Erik's taking a deep breath like, yeah, we're back at it again.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah. We've done some live shows, which is pretty cool. We do a little mental health happy hour every now and then where we go live on YouTube, and that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
But we got it done, so that's a good thing.
It's pretty cool what it takes to get that done.
And
Clark got it done.
Our audio visual guy, Mike Parsons, who's back there in the control room, he set us up with something pretty cool on this. We kind of did, like we said before, we kind of winged this thing, and he kind of took it to the next level. So it's pretty cool stuff. Yeah. But we're here live today on episode 23. Our guest, Aaron Reason. Thank you for coming in, man. We really appreciate it. For those of you out there that are listening into this episode, this is Building a Refuge Bar Podcast, the Bar Podcast anyways, and we appreciate you listening. Go out and like and subscribe to all the social media channels, YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, all that jazz.
All that fun stuff.
Go to our website, www.buildingarefuge.org. It's pretty cool stuff out there. So, but yeah, we appreciate having you on, my man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you guys having me, man. This is definitely a cool experience. Like I said, this thing is, you guys are really kind of blowing my podcast out of the water, honestly. You guys I got to get a sign, man.
Yeah.
A sign or something.
Well, you can talk to Erik and, or not Erik, but Clark and the team, they'll get you hooked up.
At least get my table painted or something.
Yeah.
Well, I've listened to your podcast, and the content's what matters, and it's pretty awesome.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Nice.
So everybody that's listening out there, too, Building a Refuge focuses on men's mental health, and Aaron, one of the big reasons you have quite a story that I think covers not only the challenges in life and struggles and things like that, but most importantly, the hope side of what we do.
That's
and,
right.
That's why we're all here and hanging out in the studio, and we got some guests in studio today, a little audience with us, so that's pretty cool. They can't see it, but I wish we could pan over and show everybody, because it's about I think it's our biggest audience.
It is.
Yeah.
We got a studio live.
So we thank you all for coming out today. Thank you guys for doing this. So, but Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Give us a little background, where you're from, and where you're at, and so on.
So I'm from Anderson, Indiana. I work full time as a behavioral tech manager at a drug and alcohol treatment center called Bridges of Hope.
Okay.
I'm also the assistant chaplain at the Madison County Jail for the Madison County Sheriff's Chaplaincy Program. So I actually grew up in Texas. I was raised there. They always say, nothing but steers and queers from Texas, and that's not true.
You don't have horns.
No, I never saw a steer the whole time I was down there. So that's bull crap.
That's awesome.
But yeah, man, I've lived up in Anderson for about 33 years now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, very nice. Well, just a little bit about Bridges of Hope. I know I've kind of come across it, in the last month with our son Austin, and we're grateful to the whole staff up there. And you, man, you're a big impact on him, and I really appreciate you for that, man. And so tell us a little bit about your past. And I know for some folks out there that may be listening to this podcast anyways, they may have heard yours as well. But it is an amazing story, man. Like, I was blown away when I heard it.
Yeah. Everybody loves a good redemption story.
Amen.
And honestly, I didn't think that mine was ever going to become one. It took a
Well, we're glad it is.
Yeah. Sure. So just to kind of give you a background, I started getting in trouble right around the age of 15, man. I started getting in trouble. Believe it or not, I had beautiful long flowing hair, man. And
see, that's the beauty of video, recording this, or I don't know if video's right, because it's not video anymore, it's like digital, but it's digitally they can see that long flowing hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
if you guys could add that in, that'd be great. Yeah, man, so I just went through this really rebellious phase when I was about 15. I found early on in life I liked not only to do drugs but to sell them. And I'd made a connection with a guy that became my weed plug in high school. Now, my last name is Reason. and I had an older brother too, that I lost to an overdose. But so we had nicknames in high school. His name was Resin, and mine was Little Resin because we smoked and sold so much pot. So, that was what we were called. And, we really lived up to that name, I'll tell you. But really, from about 15 to 17, my life just took a real downward spiral. I started getting in trouble, just minor things, minor consumption. I got busted with some weed one time, and then truancy. I stopped. Yeah. I didn't really like going to school. Yeah. Before the age of 15, I did absolutely great in school. Yeah. Never had any problems. We'd moved towns. I'd moved from a little town called Frankton to Elwood. And
okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys ever seen that movie Dazed and Confused. Have you seen that movie?
Oh yeah.
Well, when I moved from Frankton to Elwood, it was like literally moving into the scene of that set of that movie.
In Elwood or Frankton?
Elwood.
Yeah,
Elwood. It's just like that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how my high school years went. But by the time I was 17, I'd had a couple little stints in juvenile. My parents were getting sick of my crap. Both my parents were alcoholics, so I grew up in, that kind of a home. And, it wasn't a great home life at all. So, I just kind of turned to the streets. And when I was 17, I got kicked out. And, I got an apartment with a guy in Anderson. And we had this like little, I wouldn't really call us a gang, but a group of guys, right?
Sure.
And we just, I don't ever want to glorify this at all, but, this was the lifestyle that I lived. We would actually just go around robbing houses every day, man. That's what we did. We were doing cocaine, smoking weed, drinking real heavy. We were really fascinated with guns and just, living this idiotic lifestyle.
What time, like what year was this?
This is in 1997, going into 98.
Yeah.
And so basically, we'd done this string of burglaries, and we ended up getting busted for it. And I was a juvenile at the time. So my older brother was a part of that little burglary ring too. And, my brother and I were actually in the police station together, and he was like, listen, man, you need to take these charges. You're only 17. None of this stuff's going to stick on you. So,
wow.
When my brother told me that, I grew up in a time, where it was like, you do the crime, you do the time. It is what it is. We knew what we were doing. We knew what to expect. And you just didn't talk to cops. And I was very uncooperative with the police. And it cost me a lot, man. There was I went to juvenile. I sat there for about 6 months. And then on my 18th birthday, a detective came over to the juvenile center and questioned me about a gun that was taken from one of the houses that we'd robbed.
On your birthday?
Yeah, this is on my 18th birthday.
18.
Man. So on my 18th birthday, he comes and questions me. I don't talk to him, don't cooperate. And he said, "Well, I got a surprise for you because I'm going to come back here with a warrant today, and today you're going to jail. You're going to go to the big boy house." So my 18th birthday.
What was your mindset then? I mean, were you still kind of in that, like, F the pull, like, whatever, dude?
Yeah. This is so weird, but I remember what I ate in juvenile that morning. We had pancakes and orange slices.
Yeah.
And I literally went from that, and he said one thing that stuck out to me. He's like, well, you'll get a bond now, so maybe you can bond out. And so my mindset was,
I'm getting out of here.
Maybe I'll get out of here. Maybe I can swindle mom into getting me out of here. But it didn't pan out like that at all. So, I got waved over to jail, went to jail. I just was very naive about the law back then.
But this is juvenile big boy jail.
Yeah. And I mean, just to give you an idea of like what the sentencing differences were from juvenile to jail, like when the attorney was talking to me in juvenile, I was looking at doing like 6 months in boys' school. That was kind of the pleas we were working out, and then sending me to a treatment center, much more lenient. Yeah. And I went from that to, the attorney that I got when I was 18, he brought me a plea. I didn't know anything about it. He said, you need to sign this plea. This is the best you're going to get. It was called an open plea. And what that means is it's open to the court's discretion on whether or not they accept it or not.
Okay.
So you always want to get a closed plea. I learned
Yeah.
that later on in life. You don't want that word open in there. And so basically what happened, man, was, I signed this 10-year plea. I go into court. I was the first one to get sentenced out of this burglary ring.
Yeah.
And they really just made an example of me. Everybody got up and testified against me. And at the end of the day, I was wrong. I was completely wrong. There was nothing I could do. I just had to own my BS and, hope for the best. But what ended up happening was the judge denied my open plea in court, enhanced the sentence to a 15-year sentence.
Oh,
wow. When they'd arrested me, I'd got busted. I had a 10 strip of acid on me too, which was a D felony. So that was ran.
That went congruent with that same.
Yeah, it went consecutive. So
Yeah,
I ended up with 18 years when I was 18 years old. So,
Jeez.
Does that even register with an 18-year-old? Like what that means? Like,
you know what, man? I was thinking about this story. I remember, because you got to think, man, like I'm a kid. I'm not a grown man. I'm 18. I'm still a kid. And I remember looking back in the courtroom and seeing my mom and going, Mama, I was tripping, man. I was like, oh, this isn't good at all.
Right.
And it didn't really sink in, and until nothing really sank in until I got on that prison bus, man. And the place I went to was it's up north. It's called Westville, Indiana. Westville Prison.
You know that?
That's
And this is like
there.
in late '99 when I got there. And when you pull up, man, it's like it's an old mental hospital, right? So it looks like it's not a pretty looking place. And there was a guy that was on the bus, and I tell this story in my podcast. There was a guy that was on the bus that looked like Cyrus the Virus, right, from Con Air.
Yeah, I know that show. Yeah,
This douchebag. And this guy starts like talking smack to me, man, because like I think he could just see that, like, dude, I looked like Justin Timberlake or something back then, bro. I had this little curly blonde hair and stuff. And he's like, oh, they're going to love you in here, youngster. And I was like, well, listen, bro, I ain't no bitch. You ain't going to talk to me any which way. And,
Right.
And so we start getting into it. And he's like, well, we can fight as soon as we get off the bus. And I was like, bet. So, I got beat up about 5 minutes after I got off, the bus and got into the dorm, man. And, but me and this guy actually ended up becoming cool, after we fought. And, that was just kind of how my first few years went, man. Like I was a smaller guy. I didn't know what to expect. I was real young. And I felt like I just had to prove myself.
Yeah.
And I always say this, as I've gotten older in life, and I've really, especially like this time in my life, like I've paid attention to the people that are put in my path, right? Mm-hmm. I think God puts certain people in your path along the way to help you, and it's up to us to really see that and use that for what it's worth. And looking back at that situation, God, put a couple of guys in my path, man, some old timers that were in there that, just took a liking to me and, knew I was a little knucklehead. Those guys really took me under their wing and was like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
Like
those guys, did you stay like kind of post, and I don't probably know what I'm saying, but I mean, post the kind of jail, did you stay in contact with them, those guys at all? I mean, you
always have this idea that you will, but not really.
Okay.
One of the guys actually, he would come in and out of my life later on in life. And I would always kind of talk to him about, how he looked out for me, and these guys really just taught me how to do time. Right. Because the way I was doing time was I was going completely backwards. Like I was losing time. I was getting locked up in SAG and, fighting. And they were like, listen, man, like you need to, the goal is not to stay in here, youngster. The goal is to get out of here. And you got to start, getting into programs, man. You're young, get into school, get your education. And so, it was really kind of like they just redirected my path and helped me. And so, I started hanging out with them and working out and, doing those things that, were positive. And, it really changed the trajectory of my path in prison.
Sure.
And so I ended up doing A little over 7 years.
Okay.
On that sentence.
So you were 18. So you're 20. What? 23.
20.
Is that the math right?
20.
I don't do good math.
25. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
25.
Yeah. That number 23 came up again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's just, I don't know. I mean, I think, being 18 years old and facing something like that. Let me ask you this question. If you don't want to answer, that's cool too. But like your parents, I mean, what can you talk about that relationship at all? Like how that looked at that time for you?
Yeah. I mean, so, as a mama's boy, man, me and my mom were super close. My dad was a, ex-Marine that was just, raging alcoholic, man.
Okay.
Abusive, drunk,
Yeah.
just, and even he came up to the prison to see me, man. And he only came a couple times because, it was one of the first times I ever saw my dad really emotional.
Okay.
And I could tell it affected him in a way, and he didn't like to deal with his emotions.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and this is another thing too, is, God putting the right people in my path. My uncle, I call him my mentor.
Yeah.
It's my mom's brother.
I
This guy.
was gonna ask. Yeah.
Yeah, man. This guy has been the most consistent figure in all my incarcerations. This guy, he's the one guy that just did not give up.
Right on.
He's a believer, man, and he's lived this life. I mean, he's kind of a square and he's kind of a dork, but I love him, man. He gives you these terrible dad jokes all the time, man, and it's just him. His name's Gail.
Nothing wrong with a good dad joke every now and then.
Yeah. But, he was there trying to mentor me, trying to get me into, reading the Bible and, growing my spiritual side. So,
Sure.
My mom was devastated. My brother was getting in trouble too. And so what happened when we got busted, my brother, he was like, screw this. I'm not, he just saw what happened to me.
Yeah.
So he skipped town, man. He was on the run for like 9 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Dang.
He moved out of state, got with a girl down in Florida.
Yeah.
And so he just stayed away. And it worked for him for years. Yeah, he was out there. Did he
end up getting brought back here to Indiana, or did he like?
Yeah, so when I got out when I was 25, man, I started doing pretty good.
Okay.
Initially, I hit the ground running, man. I was doing everything I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
They'd put me in work release. I completed that, got out. I'd actually started going to church with my uncle, and was doing real good. What happened was. While I was lifting weights in prison, I'd got a hernia, and they would not operate on it back then. They do now in the prison system, but back then they wouldn't.
Okay.
And so, I scheduled this surgery.
Yeah.
That's what began my opiate addiction.
Oh,
and this is the thing, man. Like, I'm an addict through and through.
Okay.
It does not matter what drug you give me. I'm going to do it to the fullest extent.
Gotcha.
And I'm a drug dealer too. I like to sell drugs because I don't like to pay for my drugs.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm going to want to not only do it, I'm going to sell it.
You're going to maximize the opportunity in front of you.
Yeah. And, but I did really well up until that point. And I'd actually convinced my brother to come back and turn himself in.
Okay.
I'd talked to the judge and everything. I was doing really good. I was actually working part-time at this place called Man for Man Ministries. It's in Anderson. It's still around. And, I'd started working with a guy named Bob Leum, who's been just a huge leader in the recovery community and helping men rebuild their lives in Anderson. So shout out to Man for Man.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. That's
Didn't
awesome.
have any intention of promoting him, man, but he's just such a great guy. He's like, I don't know, he's like 147 now. He's still still doing probably more than all of us in this room, man. It's unbelievable. But yeah, so, my brother came back, turned himself in. And, what happened in this time is, I got with a girl and, we got pregnant and had a kid. But, I'm living this double life, right?
Right.
So what's happened is I've gotten hooked on these pills. I can't stop taking them.
What did they prescribe you? Do you remember?
Lortab 10s.
That's crazy.
And I was getting 6 a day in the beginning. I was on it for 3 months. And I didn't even understand what sick was. Like I didn't know if I stopped taking them, I'd get sick. I was really naive just to that drug. And then, I figured it out. And once I figured out, I went back to the doctor, and she came with me, and the doctor, the solution was, well, we're just going to put you on some, lower form of pills and just stair step.
Yeah. That don't work, does it?
By that time, man, I'd literally went to another doctor and started getting, it's what it's called, doc shopping.
Yeah. That movie, that show, Dope Sick, I think that does probably such one of the best jobs at showing it from your story, exactly what you just said. Maybe it's an injury, whatever, and then you get prescribed this, and then you could just see it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I worked in that industry back then, which is crazy, man. Like, I worked in a pharmaceutical distribution industry, and it's just insane the amount of scripts that were being written from some of these pharmacies.
Oh yeah. And when I started, the opiates, it was just something that I had such a hard time stopping. I did get clean after my daughter was born. I went and detoxed. I told my boss what was going on, and she actually let me detox in her basement. She really liked me a lot. So, her and her husband let me come in there and detox, and I did well, and started working at the ministry full time, and started getting myself back together again. And my daughter's mom had already lost all this trust with me, though. And, basically what happened was she took my daughter and moved out of state, to protect her.
Sure.
Do I agree with the way that it happened? Not really. She told me she was going to visit a friend in Ohio.
Yeah.
This whole time I thought we were going to get back together, and she actually just moved to North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
And so when this happened,
that was heavy, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And, this is my only child. And so, what happened was we got in an argument over the phone. And what I didn't know was for the previous 8 months, what she'd started to do was she would call me on the phone and she would ask me a bunch of questions, and said basically, listen, the only way we're going to be able to move forward is if you're honest with me about everything. If you just tell me the truth and tell me everything. Yeah. So I told her everything. I told her I was selling pills behind her back and, living this life. But I didn't know she was tape recording me the whole time.
Oh, wow.
And so what happened was she took that information after I told her I was going to fight for custody. She took that information to my probation officer. And, when you get an 18-year sentence, you don't just do half the time and it's done and over with. I still had 9 years on probation. So what happens is, even though I was sober and doing good at that time, they didn't know, I was doing all this other stuff. And so when they took the tape recordings into court, the judge, it was the same judge that sentenced me originally.
Oh, wow.
And he just gave me all my backup time. So I got sentenced to another 9 years. And
holy smokes.
went back. I know, dude, it's terrible.
Damn, Aaron.
So I went back and did a little over 4 years again. And so just wait, it gets worse. So if you're not depressed now, it's supposed to be building. It is better. This is a story of hope.
I know.
It's just getting there.
We said on the front end of this we'd have 30 minutes of wading through this stuff, and then we're going to talk.
You got to tell a story.
30. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man. So
because it's real, man. I mean, that's what we try to do. I mean, yeah.
So I get out. And this is 2009 going into 2010 now. I get out. I'm living with my parents. Literally 30 days after I get out, my mom's diagnosed with cancer. So I start taking her to all her radiation appointments. But, here's the thing is I didn't ever deal with my opiate addiction at all. And when I got out that time, I immediately started using pills. And I took my mom to her radiation treatments like a good son would do. And then I would turn around and steal her pills behind her back, just like an addict does. It was, and then, so my mom gets through her treatments. She goes into remission. She's doing great. About, I don't know, probably like a week or two later, my dad starts complaining of pain behind his right ear. He goes in and sees a doctor. They did a CAT scan or whatever, and he's diagnosed with terminal cancer, no cure. 6 months to live, it's over with. And so in this time, in the midst of all this, I'm trying to get myself together, but I'm surrounded by all this pain medicine, and I'm trying to be the good guy that takes care of them. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm an addict, and I'm taking their stuff, and it's causing problems. And one day my brother calls me up, and my brother and I had kind of been separated from there. He'd gotten out of prison and ran again. And there was like 3 black sheep in my family. It was me, my cousin, and my brother.
Okay.
And so my brother's up in Chicago with my cousin, and he calls me and he says, "Listen, man, I need you to bring all the money that you've got, and I need you to drive up to Chicago today. I'm in a bad situation, man."
Yeah, you're like, shit.
Yeah. And at this time, I'm on actually a maintenance drug for opiates. It's called Suboxone.
Yep. I know, yep.
So I'm actually not doing bad in life. Like, I had a job at Applebee's. I got a little apartment, a little car.
Yeah.
I'm actually starting to stabilize and do okay. And I get up to Chicago, and my brother is dope sick from heroin. I didn't even know he was doing heroin. And he's like, "We got to go get some heroin, like, right now." And my cousin's downstairs, and he's on heroin too. They're both out. It was just a terrible situation. As an addict, I was fascinated with how heroin was, you know what I mean? Because it's basically like the strongest form of opiates, and
You had an experiment with heroin.
I'd never done heroin up to that point. But when I went and spent,
Do you think that's the addiction? That was like the addiction part of things, Aaron? I mean, I'm just asking because I don't know that from a brain, or like from a mental perspective, right? But do you think it was like when you saw them, were you like, damn, like what's all this about?
Yeah, I mean, you would think as a normal person, if you see somebody that's like, just deathly ill, vomiting, diarrhea, you're not going to be like,
I want to do that.
I want to do what you're doing, man.
Yeah, right.
That looks fantastic. It's not like that at all. What I was fascinated with was the euphoria of what the drug did for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'd always wondered about it, and it was just that little wondering that, made me want to try it. And so I tried it that day.
No shit. That day?
That day, yeah.
Holy smokes.
I actually didn't take my medicine that morning. I hadn't taken it yet when he called me, so I just hadn't taken it, and I'd brought some with me. But when I, knew that we were getting heroin, I just wanted to try it, so I did. And like I said, I'm a drug dealer too, so I wanted to. My idea was to supply our habits. Was I would, buy heroin up there, bring it back to Anderson, sell it. And that's what I did.
You already had this going on in your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how my mind operates. It was just like, okay, how can we, do this? And, my brother was very convincing, like, yeah, we should do that. Sounds great. So,
I'm not laughing. I'm just, yeah.
And, I'm one of those people that was like, I would never put a needle in my arm. I would never go down that path. I would never shoot up, none of that. And he was shooting up, and my cousin was shooting up. And, I felt like they were getting a lot higher than what I was getting. Mm-hmm. So one day I asked him to shoot me up. And, it didn't really take at first. I didn't really care for it that much at first. But I got tired of driving back and forth to Chicago every day.
Yeah.
And I've got people in Anderson that are like dependent upon me. And so I ended up looking around, and I found
because you were selling at this time.
Yeah. And I found
you.
a different connection in Indianapolis. And once I started going to that person, I started having them shoot me up. And, it's like going, when you graduate to the needle in the heroin game, man, it's like going from having a monkey on your back to a gorilla. The desperation that comes along with that is unparalleled.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
We've had some guests on the podcast, man. A good friend of ours, Patrick Stone, he was telling us about the same thing, man. And this is what blew me away during that podcast was just the detail that he would share about the process of it all.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, like that.
Well, and what I took from his and what I'm taking from you now, like I'm thinking as a parent, because you talk about your mom and dad and your relationship with your mom and dad and how much, like you've mentioned several times, like, I wanted to care for my parents while they were going through what they were going through. You wanted to do all those things. But as parents out there who are dealing with kids who are addicted or members of their families who are addicted, it's not that they don't care for you. It's that addiction. I mean, you're looking at your brother laying in a bed and he's completely he's like laying in just sitting there.
Yeah.
And you want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how powerful addiction is.
Yeah.
That's what I took from Patrick when he told his stories, and what I'm taking from you right now. And that's important for, I think, for parents out there who are dealing with kids who are addicted to understand it's not about the love or lack thereof. It's the addiction and how strong that is.
It's like you lose your will to choose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Like I didn't have a choice, man.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had to go get this every single day.
Well, then you put on top of it too, just like think what you just explained, the addictive nature. But then you're like, man, I can make money at this.
Yeah,
and that probably euphoria, that high of going to buy it, sell it, and it becoming a business.
Yeah,
right.
And it funds his
right.
habit.
Yeah,
it funds my habit. I loved the feeling that I got when people relied on me.
Yeah,
you know, it was just part of feeding my ego. You know, is all it was. And so yeah, I did that for a while. You know, and when you go into the world of heroin, you know, which now it's really just fentanyl, but when it used to be heroin, you know, you step into this world, it's like you just don't even understand, you know. And what I mean by that is people die regularly that are around you that are using, people overdose, and you're thrown into these situations where you have to like try to save people's lives. And you're in these moments of absolute panic because, you know, when you're selling it to the people that are overdosing too, you know, you're worried about their life, you're worried about your life, you know, because it's a selfish thing, right? And so there were many moments like that. So I want to talk about, you know, this is an important part of my story, and I think that, you know, your listeners will relate a lot to this, because by this point in my life, I start becoming suicidal. And, you know, in the past, maybe I'd had some ideas, but at this point, you know, I'm at, you know, one of the lowest points in my life. And I'm just using every single day. You know, I can't stop. And in the midst of all this, what happens is, you know, I'll tell this story. So, my dad gets called into the hospital. He's got to go to the hospital. The family gets called in because we think he's going to go. And me, my mom, and my aunt went up to the hospital. And as we're sitting in this room, I didn't have time to get anything together that morning to use. And this nurse comes in and she sits 3 fentanyl patches down on the tray right in front of me. And then she just leaves.
You're like, are you shitting me?
Yeah, and I'm just like, okay. I don't know how long she was gone, but I knew how long it took me to take one of them.
Yeah.
It was almost immediately. And so I didn't really understand it. Like, for some stupid reason in my mind, I'm like, she won't notice. She'll just think she didn't grab it. Like, they have to go, like, get these things out of the machine.
It's like a piece of gauze. They're not going to know any different.
Accounted for.
Yeah. And they are.
No idea, like, how any of that worked.
Yeah.
But, so, yeah, I steal this patch. I go downstairs and use it and come back up, and the nurse comes back in and she starts looking for it, and, you know, like a real addict, I start helping her look. You know, I'm like, where could you have dropped this thing? I don't know where. It's got to be here somewhere.
So weird.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Somebody must have taken it.
Sure you brought 3? I don't think you think you brought 2. But yeah, so, you know, they pretty much locked down the whole floor. An officer that's working at the hospital.
Yeah, they'll lock it down.
He comes up, and you know, all these nurses are searching the floors looking for it. And this guy just comes up, and it's like he just saw through all the BS and looked right at me, dude. And he's like, hey, you, come here with me.
Yeah.
And so he takes me in a room with this nurse, and he's like, you know, the reason she had to leave your room is because her grandma just died. And now she's about to lose her job because you stole this patch.
Oh, my gosh.
So puts me on the spot, and he said, now listen, I know your dad's dying. I know people do crazy things, you know, when their parents die. He said, so this is what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to take a tape recorded statement, you know, and he's not like asking me if I stole this. He's telling me, like, I know what's going to happen. I know you stole the patch, man. He said, but I'm not going to take you to jail today. He said, you're just going to record a statement, and I'll put a warrant out for you in a couple weeks. And that's what he did, which is really, so for 2 weeks I got away, you know, got to stay free. But now in my life, you know what I mean? Like, I know jail time's coming again. I've already done so much time at this point, you know, it's just, you know, I'm at like 11 or 12 years of prison incarceration at this point. And, you know, I really had it set in my mind that just, you know, I was not going to go back to prison no matter what. And, you know, you can check a website to see when your warrants become active. And so I'm checking this thing every day. And the day that it became active, you know, I didn't have any heroin or anything. And I started drinking with one of my neighbors immediately. And it's like noon. By 4 o'clock, I'm absolutely smashed. And I started sending texts and calling, you know, my family members. And I went to my other neighbor's house, and he had a gun, and I was sitting there messing around with the gun for a while, and I was texting everybody, basically saying my goodbyes. And I believe it was my aunt that called the cops, you know, and said, "Hey, listen, you know, my nephew, you know, at this
like
place,
do a well check.
Yeah, you guys need to go check on him. You know, he's got a gun." Well, I'm a felon. When you say I've got a gun,
yeah,
man.
And in law enforcement, as you know today, that's like, all right,
yeah. So, they sent everybody out. They sent a SWAT team out to get me, and basically, man, a long story short, I won't get into the whole story, but when they came in to get me, you know, I was in this trailer court, and it's like a U shape, and you know, I take off running, and I get away from them for a little bit, and I ended up sneaking back into the trailer court because I thought they'd left. This is like, I was out in the pouring rain for a couple hours, and I sneak back in the trailer court and go back to my neighbor's house, the one that had the gun, you know, knock on the door, and he lets me in, and I continue to drink and stuff, and you know, I'm like, my adrenaline's like through the roof right now, and I call my older brother, you know, and you know, I'm talking to him on the phone. I'm like, "Man, you should have seen me, bro. I'm like Harrison Ford, the fugitive. They can't catch me." I was like, I just got away from all these cops, but I'm so
Aaron, I'm gonna
stupid.
say that. Listen, I want to say that, and I want you to continue on, but I gotta say it because I appreciate you laughing about it. I know it's not a laughing matter whatsoever, right?
Sure
but I mean, even like we had Patrick on, like he was telling us some of the crazy shit that he did, and he's like, "You just gotta effing laugh, man."
Yeah,
he's
man.
like, "It's just you can't do anything else about it." So I appreciate that you see like that, like, you know, we can laugh today about it, man.
Yeah, man. So I'm talking so loud on the phone that my brother tells me on the phone, he's like, "You dumbass, they're still there." He's like, they set a command post up at Mom's house, bro. They got the whole
like,
place.
what?
They're like, they've got the roads barricaded off looking for you, bro. He's like, lay down and go to sleep. He's like, "Bro, your bond's gonna be $500. Like, I'll get you out in the morning. Just go to sleep." And this canine officer was walking a dog around the trailer, and the windows were open, and he heard me. And then they start beating on the door. And at first, this guy that I'm with, he's being super cool. And he's like, "Man, I'm not letting them in here." I was like, "Yeah, man, F the police, bro. Don't let them in here." And
we can do this.
Yeah, let's stick together, man. And they're like, it's almost like they could hear what we were talking about.
The whole plan, right?
Yeah, they're like, "We're going to knock this window out if you don't open this door and send the canine unit in." And he's like, "All right, I should probably get that door." And, you know, there's these brief moments in life, man, where you know, life just changes. In that moment, you know, I decided to do something so ignorant. I was going to try to commit suicide by cop. And so what I did was, when they started to get the door open, as I jumped up and I put this guy in a chokehold, and I kicked the door open. And
the cop or the guy?
I put the guy in the house.
Okay.
In a chokehold.
Gotcha.
And I basically took him as a hostage. And I started screaming at the cops for everybody. I was hiding my arm so they couldn't see it. Like I had a weapon on him. Like I was going to kill him. Because I thought if I did that they would just shoot me and kill me. And there was, like, I can't even explain, like, you know, as I looked out.
It's so hard. Like, sitting here watching you telling the story, I can't even, like, looking at you, man. Like, I'm trying to, in my mind, picture this.
Yeah.
And I can't even paint the picture.
You know, and as I'm looking out, there's all these guns drawn on me and flashlights, and they're screaming at me. They're screaming at him. They're like, "Does he have a weapon on you? Does he have a weapon?" And this guy's like, "No, shoot him, shoot him." And so they shoot us. They shoot us both with a taser gun, and this poor guy, man, he gets electrocuted. I get electrocuted, and then this cop tackles me through the door, and apparently I was fighting back. This police report said that he had to closed fist strike me in the face 8 times to finally subdue me, which I feel like he knocked me out on the first punch, so I don't know where the other 7 came from. You know what I mean? But
I mean, you're riding the lightning, man. So who knows, right?
Yeah. And so I wake up in jail the next day. My eye is completely swollen shut. My jaw is like sitting sideways, and you know, I went from facing 2D felonies to 2A felony kidnappings, criminal confinement, intimidation on a police officer, and just this whole slew of charges, right? And once again, you know, this is so this is how everything pans out. I get all these charges. I am completely miserable now. You know what I mean? I'm like, man, I couldn't even, you know, off myself, right? You know, now I'm really like, now I'm like, great, now I got to go do 50 years in prison. You know, and so as I'm sitting in prison or jail, my dad ends up passing away. 5 months later, my mom, so I was getting plea bargains, and the plea bargains were for 30 years. That was what they said was going to be the lowest sentence. They were like, look, dude, they're not going to go with your history. You know, 30, which would be doing 15. Good behavior, I'd probably be out 10 or 12. But I just I couldn't accept it, man. I was just like, I don't feel like, you know, I just did not want to accept it. And, you know, this is another part where, you know, God put the right people in my life. So my mom goes and meets with this attorney, because I called her and my brother. And this time my brother's actually doing well. He'd gotten off heroin, you know, and had been doing good for like 3 or 4 years. So they got some money together, paid an attorney, and this guy came up and, you know, basically just said, you know, what will you take? And I said, well, I'd take this charge and this charge, and, you know, you can max me out on it. And it was like an 11-year sentence. And a week after he'd met with my mom died.
Oh my gosh!
Unexpectedly. And then 2 weeks after that, my daughter's mom filed for adoption for my daughter while I was in there. So like my world's just falling apart. And at this point, man, I don't even care what happens to me. You know what I mean? Literally do not care what happens to me. Yeah. You know, I ended up just, you know, this guy really went to court and fought for me, though. I got the 11-year sentence. It actually got knocked down to 6 years. So 5 of it was on probation, 6 was in the Department of Corrections. And so I went back and did 3 years. And I'm going to try to kind of speed this up, because I want to get to the good stuff.
Yeah. Right on.
I get out, you know, and life is just different, right? I'd always gotten out.
What year was this when you got out?
2015.
Okay.
And so I get out, you know, and
wow.
You know, I'd always had like my parents to fall back on. You know, I'd be able to, you know, go, you know, stay there and use their car and all this stuff. And I had nothing anymore, so I had to go to a homeless shelter. Yeah. My brother was living out of state. He was trying to take care of me, you know, as much as he could. And finally, he was just like, man, why don't you just come down here and work with me?
Yeah. He was in Florida?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was in Florida.
Yeah.
So I go down there to Florida, and he'd started using heroin again. And so we start ripping and running again. It lasted for about 3 months, and, you know, we ended up going our separate ways. And then after I got back up here, about 2 months later, he overdosed and passed away. And, you know, at this point, man, I'm just like, I've got nothing. I'm completely strung out on drugs, you know.
And really in a 15-year time span.
Yeah.
Golly,
you know,
man.
my family's gone. I'm just like,
it's not that long. You know, I mean, it's just not that long a time. You know what I mean? 15 years goes by quick.
And I'm just like, where do I go from here? You know, and honestly, you know, I just really just wanted to die, you know, and so I would, you know, do these ridiculous amounts of dope. And, you know, I had a horrible tolerance. So I don't have a lot of overdoses in my story. Okay. You know, I did overdose one time after my brother died, but that was it. And, you know, they brought me right back, and I was fine. But, you know, I was on probation this whole time. So got put on probation, violated that. I went back to prison again, did another 2 years, and I get out, and it's like 2019 now. And I got out. I got on the maintenance drug Suboxone. Was working for a couple of guys doing some basic construction stuff, and you know, just started going backwards again. And I'm on parole, and I'm at the point where I've maxed my sentence out so much, there's just not much they can do to me anymore.
Yeah.
So then COVID hits, and when COVID hit, this time of my life, man, like the people that are surrounding me is just, I was around a lot of terrible people. Not terrible. I just a lot of drug addicts. I don't want to say terrible because
just the influence of it.
We were just all caught up in the same crap.
Yeah.
And I'm selling drugs. I ended up, getting the unemployment pay because of having a job, and then we losing it during COVID. And so now I'm starting to get all this money, and I just was miserable. And man, there was a day that I woke up, and as crazy as this sounds, man, I always had this Bible with me, right, that I'd had in prison. And I would read it, and people would laugh at me because I was reading it while I was high, you know what I mean? And this thing was falling out of my lap. And, but I was just trying to find some kind of hope and inspiration, man. And I read this Bible this morning, and I had like 4 or 5 people waiting on me to sell them dope in my living room. And I remembered something that a guy had told me in recovery years before. And he said, man, Aaron, you're only one right decision away from changing everything. You just need to figure out what that right decision is, whether it's going to rehab, bro, whether it's just not using for today. You need to figure out what that decision is. And so my decision was I went outside and I did something I've never done before, man. I called my parole officer, and I told him everything that I was doing. And I was like, man, if you don't come and get me, I'm going to die out here. And I was like, and I don't want to die. And he said, man, all right, I'm going to get you help. All you got to do is come turn yourself in. And I was like, well, listen, I don't really turn myself in. I don't know
really if you know
high.
my history.
We don't do that.
I am really high, bro, but I'm not that high, man. But this is where I'm at if you want to come and arrest me.
Yeah.
And so, they came a couple days later. I detoxed in jail. And, this is where life begins to get good, man.
Yeah.
This is the good stuff.
That's cool. Let me ask you a quick question before you start this.
Yeah.
When you were reading that Bible that morning, do you remember anything about what you were reading, or do you remember where you were in it?
I have no idea, man.
Okay. All right.
I wish I did.
Yeah.
I wish I did because it sparked something.
Yeah. It did.
And this Bible plays a part in my story.
Sure.
Coming up too, man, which was really cool because when I was in prison, like I would have these, good moments of clarity and do some good things. I started teaching a recovery Bible study while I was in prison before. And so I had no idea how that was going to be used later on, but, like I always say, man, God knew what he was doing, even though I couldn't see it. So, my PO was just a great human being, man. Got me into rehab. I went to rehab. I was in there for, I think it was a 21-day program. And I just listened, man, for the first time in my life. I just listened. They told me what to do. I just did it. I was tired of fighting, man. And they said, go to a halfway house and, stay there, do their program. So, once again, I remembered a guy that told me about this place in Anderson called the House of Hope. And he was like, man, if you ever get serious about your recovery, you're going to go to the House of Hope in Anderson because you can't get away with nothing there, man. They're super strict, but it's a great program.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did, man. I went there, graduated 2 weeks early, and I took on the role of staying on as a house manager and managing the 3-quarter house.
Yeah.
And I did that for a year. And during that time, man, I got a sponsor. I worked the steps, of AA, and it radically changed my life, man. Like for so long and so many years, and me, having all these years in prison, I'd created all these mindsets, right? And and I had all these bad mindsets and ways of errors,
like victimization, right? Yeah,
victimization, and just terrible thought processes.
Yeah.
And so I really had to do a lot of self-examination, man, and look at because I always felt like, I'm this good guy, and it's like there's this good guy and this bad guy, and they're just at war with each other.
Yeah.
How do I get this good guy out? And I'll be honest, the solution for me was, to put God first and allow God to work through me, bro.
Yeah.
It was the main thing that I took from the steps, and I made a decision, and I didn't know what that looked like, to follow God. I'd never done it. But I knew I didn't want to die, And so, I stayed on at the halfway house for a year. And at about 18 months, I moved out, got my own place, and it's just these beautiful moments, man, in my recovery, and like when I got my license again in my car while I was in the halfway house, right? So as I get my license in my car, my sponsor has become, my best friend. His family is my family. His parents call me their son. I go there for, all of our, Christmas, all, family events, and that's another thing, man. God put these great people in my life that just love me, man. And his dad sold me a car. He really sold me a beater. He really got over on me, but we're not going to get into all that, man. You know what I mean? He's old Pops is a shyster, man. He got me together on that little car. But
sold you a 75 Chevette for $5,500.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's a runner. I'm like, yeah, we'll see how long. But yeah, whenever I got, this car, I'm driving back, and they lived right next to the prison I was just at.
Okay.
And so, like, as I'm driving, like, the sun's setting, man, and just if you can visualize, like, I'm driving past this prison that's just held me for so many years, man.
Oh, that's crazy.
And I'm out here sober, and I'm finally winning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, damn,
Yeah.
I'm finally winning in life. And it was moments like that, man, that just kept me going. And after I was about 18 months sober, one of the guys that was a house manager at the halfway house before I was there, he'd gotten a job at Bridges of Hope.
Okay.
And he called me up and was like, hey, man, I don't know what you're doing with your life or what's going on with you, man, but I think you'd be a great fit to come over here and help out. And I really had never thought about it. And honestly, the job I was at, I was making really good money. Yeah. And this was a big change, you know, not just financially, but just, in life. I'd never done it before, and in taking this position, I really began to discover, my purpose. Oh, yeah. And my purpose is, helping other addicts recover, man. Yeah. And, so many great things have happened since I've started there. That same Bible that I read that day in that same group, I'm at a recovery event in Anderson, right? And as I'm at this recovery event, I run into this chaplain at the jail. Yep. And I get to talking to him and, sharing that I used to teach a group out of the, that Bible in prison. And he was like, well, maybe we could connect and you could come up to the jail and do it. And I'm thinking to myself, bro, there's no way they're going to let me into this jail, man. It's not.
My face is on the front of this place.
Yeah, I'm like, bro, you're not going to get me into that jail. And literally, man, 2 weeks later, he calls me and was like, hey, man, you're good to go. I talked to the jail commander, and I'm like, what? I'm like, there's no way. And so I started, going up there. I've been teaching it. October will be 2 years I've been going up there every Friday, man, teaching these groups because I want to help guys recover too, man. Yeah. And the people that are incarcerated break out of these, prison mindsets, and help them change their behaviors and become productive again. And, I think just like anybody that's going through suicide or, suicidal tendencies or anything, like we get into this state and this hopeless state and frame of mind.
It's a cycle.
And you just can't see past it. But once you can, get a little bit of hope and you get past that initial, like, I'm going to be all right, man. Yeah. Great things come to pass, man. And so now, after volunteering for a year, they hired me on as the assistant chaplain up there now.
That's amazing.
And, I'm a manager out there, at Bridges of Hope. That same halfway house that I went through. Yeah. I'm on the board of directors there now.
That's great.
I get to do that. And we just had the sheriff's chaplaincy. We have a banquet every year. Mm-hmm. And the mayor came to this last one in March, and the chaplain I work with, man, he's just a great guy. He's been such a huge impact in my life. Another mentor that's came in my life, man. And he was like, I want you to speak at this thing. And I was like, well, that's in front of 500 people, man.
You just texted me that the other night.
I know I'm a good talker, man, but I was like, you don't understand. Like, I get explosive diarrhea when I have to talk in front of people, man. Not saying that's happening right now, you guys.
You did say he was going to fart earlier, but
I did. It's not but, I was like, man, there's no way I'm not doing it. He didn't even ask, and there's a girl that teaches the groups that I teach too.
Yeah.
Just an awesome human being that she's got an awesome story too, man. And so I teach the male groups and she teaches the female groups. And so he's talking to her. He's like, you guys both just need to share your stories up there this year. And so we ended up doing it, man. We ended up doing it. And this is pretty cool. I'll share this with you guys. So, the mayor's sitting right in front of me, and
Mayor Anderson.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're sharing our story, and when it is all said and done, I'm up at the jail teaching my group one week, right?
Yep.
This local attorney that's known me forever, right? He's in there, and he said, "Aaron, come here, man. I want to talk to you." I was like, "What's up, man?" He goes, he wasn't there at the banquet or whatever, he's like, "Man, I'm sorry I missed the banquet." He said, "But man," he said, your speech must have really impressed some people. He said, "Because the next day I got a call from the chief deputy prosecutor here in Anderson, and he asked me if I knew you." And he was like, "Yeah, I know Aaron. I've represented him a couple times. I've known this guy for years."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, would you do me a favor, man? Would you represent him and let's get his record expunged, man?"
Oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me! I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Oh.
Said that guy's earned it, man. So.
Holy smokes!
But what comes with that? There's a catch. I got to pay $8,000 for all these court costs and fees that I had for years. So I was super stoked at first. And they're like, "Oh, it's gonna be $8,000 though." Huh? So yeah,
you're like, all right.
So I'm selling feet pics on OnlyFans now. If you guys sign up, man, it'd be great. Any kind of support.
www.Aaron Reason feet pics.
They're not pretty feet, but you got to do what you got to do. No, I'm just kidding, man.
I love it. It's fantastic, man. Yeah. It's amazing to me, man, because like I said, the stories like that you share, it's hard to like wrap my head around it. Yeah. You know what I mean? But I know they're real. I know 100. I mean, like I know 150% it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the guys that you deal with now, not only in the prison but also in what you're doing in recovery.
Yeah.
What age groups is it? All over the board?
It's all over the board, man. Yeah. Like the groups in jail. I get some guys come in, they're like 18 or 19. I got guys in that are in their 50s or 60s.
And what a unique position you're in, because you were 18.
Yeah,
and
it's the coolest thing in the world, man. To because these guys know me. A lot of these guys they're still getting locked up, still doing the same thing, and then I come walking in. You know what I mean? And seeing that, just gives them that hope that like, man, if this dude can do it. Certainly I can do it.
Right.
So, that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so much, man. There are a million questions I'd have for you, and I know, we're limited to an hour on our show, but we could go 2 hours, right? So we, as we always do with a lot of our guests, like, you're coming back for a part 2. But I mean, I think one of the things that we've heard from other folks, like I said, from Patrick and other folks who've been on the the podcast, we are a faith-based organization, but we don't throw it at people.
Right.
And I think one of the guys, Kyle Leum, man, he really made me think about this when he was on our show. He was like, I'm not going to be shy about telling somebody that. Yeah. Because he's a veteran and, he's been through some, this guy's got a lot of stories as well, but he's like, you know what, man, like I'm not shy about it, man. That's what helps. That's what's helped me. That's my foundation. And I mean, and I see it on you, man. I mean, you made a comment, I think it was when you were driving by that prison and just seeing like of anything I could paint a picture of, it was that.
Yeah.
And I just see this amazing sunset and I see you looking at it and I see you just going, what? Like, like, and that's just the way Christ works, man. Yeah. I mean, he will be as patient can be, but he believes in you so much. Like, he's like, I'm going to use this guy,
and it's funny how my perspective has changed a lot, during my recovery. And, I looked at all those years, gone, which was about 16 years in prison. And I look at those years and I was like, man, those were such wasted years. But, my perspective really changed when I began to go up here to the jail and teach, because this is the thing, man, is like, I didn't know it then, but, God knew it all along. He knew exactly where I was going to be at. And so I had an opportunity. There was a lot of years, man, where I stayed studying the Bible, and I had years to do that and to grow in my knowledge. And even when I wasn't applying that knowledge, it was still there. And so now that I am getting to use it, you know what I mean? It's like that time wasn't ever really wasted. I was just being prepared for something that I couldn't see yet.
Let me ask you this. Do you get intimidated when you walk into a jail?
First few times, was like, man, I really hope these doors open back up, because if they don't.
But the reason I ask you that question is the purpose behind the question is when you say that God has a purpose for you and has you on this path, right? And so blessed that you can see this. You going in there, like I wouldn't have the first mindset about how to even approach somebody that's incarcerated, that's an addict, that has gone I don't even know where I would start other than just hanging out with them and listening to somebody. And that can be good enough. But for you can walk in there, you've been in those shoes. Mm-hmm. Like you can talk. You talked about the first time that you saw that, the prison up in northern Indiana. You've talked, like you can speak to it directly. Yeah. And that, I have to think, settles somebody's mind when you sit across from them like this. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that was my home for years, so it's not like I'm going into unfamiliar territory. That's what I mean. Man. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'm going back to a place that. And that has to be so humbling. You know what I mean? Like really in the terms of Christ revealing himself to you and what, like, hey man, this is what I'm going to have you do. Yeah. But the other part of it is too, is you being like, all right, man, cool. Yeah. Like, all right, I'm good with that. Yeah.
How hard was it? Or how easy was it, I guess I should ask it both ways, for you to make that decision to go and do that ministry?
I did struggle with a couple of things, man. And, I'll talk about this. So, in prison, you kind of got to create this image of yourself, right? Yeah. You wear this mask of this person that you're, it's called maintaining images, and I maintained an image of somebody that I really wasn't all along. And so I struggled with going back in because I was thinking in my mind, like, are these guys going to, call me a snitch or something? Or somebody going to say something stupid like that and I'm going to react badly? And, but, where my heart's at and what God's doing, this is just part of, the purpose. And I know what my goal is and where my heart's at. And I really, got past that and understood that, these guys are going to see the sincerity of my walk. Like, I can talk good, but like when your walk matches everything that you're saying, man, that's what got my family back, supporting me again. That's what, got me to the places that I'm at, man. Is, as we say in the program, you got to do the work. And I did the work. Yeah. So.
Well, and there's a reason I asked that question is because, and you don't know my story, but you and I have a similar story, in somewhat. And you're part of the story where you saw the sunset. Mm-hmm. Mine was the sunrise. Okay. In Pendleton. Okay. And at that point in time, I was dead set on the fact that I was going to go do prison ministry. Yeah. And I never got that calling. I never like it was me saying I was going to go do that. Yeah. And I never felt that calling. And finally, as Brandon knows in my story, I finally did get a calling. And the reason that what's beautiful about, I can see it in your demeanor, I can see it in your story that is your calling. Yeah. My calling is this. Yeah. To get to them before they get to prison. For sure. Because when I got out, there was a bunch of guys that it was natural. I hung with a bunch of guys who I did, went to chapel with and all that. Mm-hmm. And they went out and did prison ministry. And I was like, okay, that's just what I have to do. That's what I'm going to do. And it was in my own strength I was going to do that. And I just never felt that calling. And so when you shared that story about, that sunset, I just had it the other way. I had it in the morning. And that's
when was going down, yours was going up.
Yeah, and that's when I knew my heart changed. Yeah. That's when, because I didn't feel it for myself. Yeah. I felt the angst and the love for the guys that were behind the fence. Yeah. And that's where things changed. So I knew I was going in the right direction, and I just wanted to say that because there's a lot of dudes that do prison ministry. Right. And there's a lot of guys that do it for the right reasons and some do it for the wrong reasons. Yeah. and you can see it in someone's heart and soul and demeanor when they're there for the reason, and you're there. I can see it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Honestly, man, if you told me I was going to be a chaplain 4 years ago,
Yeah. So like if
jail,
if
come on.
if Aaron today would have
no way.
if Aaron today would have ran into the Aaron back in 1997 and said, "Listen, bro, this was going to your dude." He'd be like, "Where are you from?" Right?
Cut your hair and get your life together.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, man, listen, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
we
man.
can't even express, I think. I mean, I just sitting here listening to when Erik was sharing, his part of his story, man. I feel humbled sitting here and listening to you guys, man. Erik, like I said, you'll have to go check out our stories, because how Erik and I came reunited, I guess, and reconnected is amazing all in itself. And I mean, it just blows me away, man. But it just further reinforces my belief in Christ and what we do. And I just know, I know we're on the right path of what we do. But thank you so much for coming in here. Before we go, I want to call out Bridges of Hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I know you do
man.
a lot of work for them. You also do ICANN, which is Indiana Community Addiction Network. All right. I want to make sure I get these because they're important. And then also the Madison County Sheriff's Department, and you're the chaplain there. So we appreciate all of that. And then Man for Man, I want to plug them.
Get Man for Man out there. I'll
right.
send old Bob a text.
Tell him to check it out, because I mean,
That's
one of the
awesome.
things we do at Building a Refuge, as I said, is folks listen to this and stay tuned here for a few minutes after this, because we will run all these different resources for you, and you can go out to our website at www.buildingarefuge.org. We have all of them listed there as well. So we'll definitely get Bridges of Hope, all these on here.
Man.
Because that's what we try to do, man. I mean, Erik, when he came with the name of Building a Refuge, we started laughing because it's like BAR's our acronym, right? I was like, you know that, right, Erik? He's like, well, I didn't really know it, but we want to try to build a refuge of resources, and I think that's what was the calling to Erik and calling to what we want to do, and so we just appreciate you being on, man.
Don't you guys want to hear about 23, man?
20, yeah.
on,
Before
bro.
we got
Almost
5,
stopped.
I think we got like a couple more minutes,
good.
so we can do
Let's
this.
hear it.
All right,
23.
so listen to this, man. So my
I love it. Yeah.
my favorite Bible verse is 1 Corinthians 10:13.
Okay.
10 and 13 is 23, right?
Yep.
Michael Jordan growing up, that was
Oh,
where it started.
yeah.
The whole
He's the
23
GOAT.
thing.
There's
Come
no
on,
doubt.
The GOAT.
Yeah, come on.
Greatest. Yeah. I was released from prison on October 13th of 2019. I got off parole October 13th of 2020. The podcast started on February 23rd, and it wasn't supposed to start. It was supposed to start on another day. These days just keep coming, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Like on the 23rd, great things happen. I've given my lead on the 23rd at least 5 or 6 times that I can think of.
Yeah.
I was born on April 23rd.
Right on.
My dad was born on August 23rd, and he passed away on March 23rd.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
Well, we
cool.
will release
And
this
listen,
on the 23rd.
We'll be. Yeah, that's right, man.
And the
We're
Bible
gonna do that.
says, the Bible says, where 2 or 3 are gathered.
Amen to that. That's
Come
right.
on,
and how
man.
many we got
2 or
right here? We
3.
got right.
Yeah.
Dude, I love it, man.
That's
That's
awesome.
fantastic,
That's
man.
23.
Well,
That's
thanks for
fantastic.
sharing that. Yeah,
That's awesome.
I think
For
it's a
sure.
great way to wrap us up, and we hope that everybody goes out and likes us, and go check your podcast out, right? Man, for everybody listening.
A Reason to Live.
A
on
reason to
Spotify.
live. Well, you're a reason to live, man,
right,
for
man.
sure. So,
Absolutely.
well,
Yeah.
thanks for coming on, and we appreciate everybody listening in today.
Thanks, guys.
That's a wrap. Peace.
Jesus built us a refuge, and it gives us hope.